Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. Well, I'm back in my home office today. We are back from our long vacation, so hopefully back to normal, hopefully to a regular schedule of things from now on in. So that's pretty exciting for me. I like to be able to do these things in a particular order and keep up to date with them because news Bible prophecy is happening so quickly these days, and it was very hard for me to get a quiet space, let alone get the time. While in transition, while on vacation, all these sorts of things. The cough is getting a little better, but it's still a thing. So thank you for praying for me. Thank you for all those who have supported me through this and know what I'm going through. So I'll try not to cough at all, hopefully, in this presentation. So if I go on mute, you'll know why. But at least I finally have a quiet office where I can take a look at some articles and try and relate to you how it relates to end-time Bible prophecy. So I had the question, comment on my YouTube channel on one of my videos, asking the question, do you just do videos about war these days? Is that all you do? And so I thought I would answer that because that's a valid question. Most of the last videos have been about, Israel, Russia, Syria. Where's the rest of the videos? Where are the rest of the prophecies that are happening? Well, I think we're in such a particular time and so close to some of the prophetic war scenarios that really these are the next things on our horizon. Now you're looking at a new slide from my keynote presentation, PowerPoint presentation, for those Microsoft users, where I have a whole timeline. So you'll recognize this. This is kind of the timeline of the last 10 years, which I think that we're inside of. Of course, 2018 is the year that Israel celebrated its 70th anniversary. That's what they're celebrating this year. And the Bible says that man is afforded 70 years unless by reason of strength, 80. And I believe God is giving Israel an extra 10 years through his own strength, giving strength to Israel for such a time as now. Because the 7-year tribulation was for the salvation of the Jewish nation. And we're certainly not inside the 7-year tribulation yet because the Antichrist hasn't shown himself yet. So I believe that's coming and coming shortly. And I believe the end of 6,000 years of man is around the year 2028, plus or minus a year. But again, given that Israel's 70 years old, it makes sense, this year, from 1948, it makes sense that they get basically 80 years by reason of strength, by God, and that would kind of converge and add to the confirmation that indeed the 6,000 years of man concludes in the year 2028, basically, and that's kind of the timeline I'm going with at this point. So if you look at this, so 2018, that's the big spike on the far left-hand side of your chart, and then 3 years from then, 2021, is what I believe the start of the 7-year tribulation, and that means there's a bunch of stuff that has to happen prior to that. Most would agree that there's prophecies that need to occur before the revealing of the Antichrist. One of them, if you're a pre-trib rapture guy, is a rapture. And so I asked a question in the bottom right: post-tribulation, pre-wrath rapture, or is it a pre-trib rapture? And of course, you'll know if you've listened to me that I'm swaying towards a post-trib, pre-wrath rapture, post-tribulation, which basically effectively means a mid kind of standard interpretation 7-year tribulation. But that's kind of beyond the point. So what I want to talk about is the 3 years prior to the 7-year tribulation, and this is why I talk about war so often, because I believe there's some events which precipitate, which cause, which happen prior to, rather the start of the 7-year tribulation, because we know the Antichrist has to come out. But most scholars would agree that Ezekiel 38 and Isaiah 17 rather likely happen prior to the 7-year tribulation. And most scholars also agree that Isaiah 17 happens prior to Ezekiel 38. So I've got some arrows there. I've got Isaiah 17 on the bottom left. On the bottom right, I've got Ezekiel 38. And then up at the top, you can see the economic collapse. Now, why do I have the economic collapse in there? And this timeline isn't exact. I don't know exactly when within the 3 years or when prior to the year 2021 or the start of the 7-year tribulation when this is going to occur. But it has to happen somewhere in there. And I put it kind of in between just prior to Ezekiel 38 because in Ezekiel 38 it doesn't describe any Western powers, any Western superpowers. It certainly doesn't describe the United States in any strength or significant form to where you would have to agree that the United States has been taken out of power for some reason. And I believe it's because a complete and total economic collapse happens at the same time or maybe just prior to Ezekiel 38. Where is that in relation to Isaiah 17? I don't know. Isaiah 17 is the destruction of Damascus, and that is done by Israel, taking out Damascus. Maybe they get fed up with what's going on, and there's some news articles that I want to cover today, not in this video necessarily, but in another video, which describes this potential situation and the lead up to Israel actually fulfilling this. But this is kind of the timeline that I think we're on. I think we're less than 2 years away from the 7-year tribulation at this point, which means that Ezekiel 38 and Isaiah 17 are even closer. Now, Ezekiel 38 and Isaiah 17 could happen just very, very close to, just prior to the 7-year tribulation. So it could be closer to the year 2021. Point is, I think the general timeline that they occur prior to the tribulation is that's kind of where I'm at right now, what I believe is going to occur. So that's why when people ask, why do you do so much on war? Because I think these are the next big prophetic events to look out for, and that's why I'm not covering a lot of other stuff. I think the economic collapse is coming. It's definitely a significant piece of Bible prophecy, and it's coming down the pipe. But I think it's caused by or comes in conjunction with some of these other prophetic wars. And so the next things to look out for, I think, at this point, are not the mark of the beast, are not the Antichrist figure, but indeed the initiation of these wars, which will be huge time milestones in Bible prophecy. Alright, so that's my explanation for kind of where we are in the timeline and where I think. So I think basically we are. Let me add one more arrow there. If I add one more arrow here, and maybe this is could be described as where we are. Are we here? Question mark. And this could describe where I think possibly we are just prior to some of these big events happening. And I think we're already, well, we're not quite a year in, I guess, if Israel's just celebrating their 70th. 2019 will be 1 year in, and then we'll be just prior to this. So that's kind of the very, very latest on where I think exactly we are in end-time Bible prophecy and in terms of the timeline of events. Alright, let's get to the article here that I want to cover and bring this up here. This is from dailycaller.com. U.S. NATO ambassador warns of military strike if Russia doesn't halt development of banned missile. Now check this out. This is the U.S. NATO ambassador. He's warning Russia of a military strike. This is significant. Remember, the U.S. is not a powerful nation. A couple of years from now, what happens to them? Right now, the U.S. is still very loud, very large on the world stage because they are this current superpower, and so they are threatening Russia. But something occurs prior to Gog Magog, like it showed on our timeline, which takes the U.S. out of power. Does Russia preemptively take the United States out, or does an economic collapse occur? So what's going on here? And this is always significant when there's a big warning like this between the superpowers, because again, we know that the U.S. is not a significant power in the last days, and that's, I think, coming very shortly. The U.S. would resort to a military strike if Russia doesn't stop development of a cruise missile that is banned under a landmark Cold War treaty, Washington's envoy said to NATO said Tuesday. Speaking at a news conference in Brussels, Bailey Hutchison warned Washington would take out, quote-unquote, an intermediate-range cruise missile system known as the 9M729 if a diplomatic resolution cannot be reached. And we know that the U.S. does not actually take this out, or maybe they do. Maybe they preemptively take this out, and this causes Russia to strike the U.S. with an EMP, or maybe Russia triggers an economic collapse. These are the things we need to be looking for, because we know there's some big things happening. We know the world order at the time of the Antichrist, and that's at the time of Ezekiel 38. And we know that the U.S. is not a significant leading nation at that time. They are taken out of power for some reason. Getting them to withdraw the missile would be our choice, of course, Hutchinson said, but I think the question was, what would you do if this continues to a point where we know that they are capable of delivering? And at that point, we will be looking at a capability to take out a missile that could hit any of our countries in Europe and hit America. In Alaska, it says, and I'll finish up with this paragraph. In 87, Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty prohibits all land-based cruise missiles with a range of 500 to 5,500 kilometers. NATO believes Russia's 9M729 missile system violates that pact. This is NATO speaking, apparently, not just the U.S. in general. And it says, which was intended to limit Moscow's first strike capability. So there, Moscow has a first strike capability now. U.S. and NATO is warning of a first strike capability. Could this be used as a preemptive strike, basically, on the U.S.? Look at this. Hutchinson's comments marked a rare public warning of a preemptive strike against Russia's ballistic missile infrastructure. So this is interesting as we relate it to the timeline of events, the fact that the U.S. does not exist in end-time Bible prophecy in relation to Ezekiel 38 and the tribulation period. So something to this is big news, I believe, and boy, rhetoric is ratcheting up. Things are increasing in terms of Bible prophecy, and we can see that we are on this timeline, and I think this is significant. This is big news because you can see how close we are. Remember, the U.S. doesn't show up. They may exist during Isaiah 17. There's no indication of where the U.S. is there, but they certainly do not seem to exist in Ezekiel 38. And many would agree that Isaiah 17 happens before Ezekiel 38. So where along this timeline is the United States, and where do they cease being a world superpower? Is there some conflict, preemptive strike between Russia and the U.S. prior to this? I'll probably have to expand this and maybe put an arrow pointing to the United States and Russia, and maybe where there's a preemptive strike on the United States within that timeline prior to Ezekiel 38. And again, these could be moved up closer to the year 2021 because I think there's going to be a cascade of events, and dominoes, a set of dominoes that are going to be occurring in the last days, and they could go off very, very quickly. Bang, bang, bang. And all of a sudden we're right heavy and hard into the 7-year tribulation, or the events that are taking place there. Now, we don't know the exact events. Is it pre-trib rapture, post-trib rapture, mid-trib rapture? Certainly we all agree it's going to be a pre-wrath rapture. But as we get closer and closer, the timing of these events is going to become more pronounced, more specific. So I hope that answers the question as to why I'm doing videos about war recently, in the last number of videos, and why I continue to. I think these are the next big prophetic events on the horizon to be watching for. Guys, are you prepared? Do you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? Because He is coming back soon. We can see the prophetic events happening. If you don't know Jesus, all you need to do is ask Him into your heart. Ask forgiveness for your sin. We are all sinners saved through grace by Jesus Christ, who died on the cross 2,000 years ago for my sin and your sin. He's coming back soon to judge the world, and prior to that, there's going to be some really hard times for Christians and non-Christians. So I hope you know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting and for subscribing. And we'll see you guys in the next video.